Hey guys, tonight we are going to travel back in time, not to witness some grand epic battle, but to try and survive a single day in the Viking Age. And let's be honest, judging by the realities of it, you might not make it to lunch. Forget the horned helmets and glorious raids you've seen in movies. We're diving into the gritty, smelly, and frankly, quite uncomfortable truth of daily life. So, before you get comfortable, truth of daily life, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to see where you're tuning in from, so drop your city and the time in the comments below. It's always a treat to see how far these stories travel. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you notice isn't a sight, but a feeling. Cold. A deep, damp cold that seems to be radiating up from the very earth beneath you. It's a cold that the rough, scratchy wool blanket covering you does a poor job of keeping at bay. It feels heavy and slightly greasy, carrying a faint, musty scent of sheep and wood smoke. You shift, and the surface beneath you isn't a soft mattress, but hard, unforgiving wood. Splinters are a genuine concern. Slowly, your other senses begin to wake up. There are sounds, but not the ones you're used to. No distant hum of traffic, no electronic beeps. Instead, you hear the soft, rhythmic breathing of many people around you. A low snore from somewhere to your left, a sleepy mumble to your right. In the center of the vast space, you hear the gentle, final crackle and pop of dying embers. It's the only source of warmth, and it's fading fast. Then the smell hits you. It's overwhelming. It's a thick, layered scent that your modern nose struggles to even process. The dominant note is smoke, not the pleasant, aromatic smoke of a campfire, but the acrid, greasy haze of a fire that's been burning day and night in an enclosed space with poor ventilation. Underneath that is the smell of damp earth, the mustiness of unwashed wool, and the sharp, undeniable scent of human sweat. Dozens of bodies, sleeping close together for warmth, have created a potent human fog, and mixed in with all of that is something else, something vaguely animal-like, a hint of manure and wet fur. It's the smell of life, raw and unfiltered. You risk opening your eyes. The world is cloaked in a deep, murky darkness, pierced only by the faint, pulsing orange glow from the central fire pit. As your vision adjusts, you begin to make out shapes, silhouettes. You are in a vast, cavernous room. Long, dark embers rise up to a high, peaked roof, disappearing into a thick gloom of smoke and shadows. You see no windows. None. The walls are made of rough-hewn wooden planks, and you can feel a faint, cold draft seeping through the gaps. This is your new home, a Viking longhouse. And it's not just a house. It's a dormitory, a dining hall, a workshop, and, in some cases, a barn, all rolled into one. You are lying on a raised wooden platform that runs along the length of the wall. Beside you, cocooned in their own blankets, are the sleeping forms of men, women, and children. There are no partitions, no cubicles, no private rooms. Your entire life is lived in public, under the watchful eyes of the entire clan. Historians and archaeologists still debate just how families manage to carve out a semblance of personal space in this crowded environment. Perhaps a strategically hung piece of woven cloth, or a large wooden sea chest marked a family's territory. But the notion of true privacy, of being able to close the door and be alone, is a luxury that simply does not exist here. You look up again, trying to trace the path of the smoke that stings your eyes and tickles the back of your throat. You see the problem. There is no chimney. The smoke from the long, central hearth simply rises, mushrooms against the ceiling, and hopefully, eventually, finds its way out through a small, shuttered hole in the roof or through the gaps in the thatch itself. This constant, eye-watering, lung-coating smokiness is a permanent feature of your new life. It keeps insects at bay, but it comes at a cost to your respiratory system. It's a strange, cold comfort to know that this is also why the timbers of excavated longhouses are often so well preserved. The smoke that makes you cough is the same smoke that has pickled this building for 1,000 years. Around you, the hall begins to stir. A child coughs, a deep, hacking sound. A man groans as he sits up, his joints cracking in the cold air. The gentle rhythm of sleep is breaking, replaced by the mundane sounds of a community waking up. You are not a shield maiden or a berserker ready for battle. You are just another body in a crowded room, cold, confused, and smelling faintly of smoke and old sheep. The glorious saga you imagined has been replaced by a simple, brutal reality. The first challenge of your day is not slaying a beast or raiding a foreign shore. It's just figuring out how to get up without falling off this platform. You manage to swing your legs over the side of the platform, your bare feet meeting the floor. It's not wood, as you might have expected, but cold, hard-packed earth. It's surprisingly solid, almost like stone, but with a dampness that instantly seeps into your skin. As you stand, a wave of dizziness hits you, a combination of the smoky air and the disorientation of your new surroundings. You take a moment, steadying yourself against the rough wooden post of the sleeping bench. People are moving around you now, their movements economical and purposeful. They don't rush, but there's no wasted motion. A woman with long, blonde hair tied in a simple knot is stoking the central fire, her face illuminated by the growing flames. She adds a few pieces of dried peat to the embers, and a new, earthier scent joins the smoky cocktail in the air. An older man, his face a roadmap of wrinkles, sits cross-legged near the fire, meticulously sharpening a small knife on a whetstone. He doesn't even look up. Children, some barely old enough to walk, are already engaged in chores, carrying small bundles of kindling or shooing a stray chicken that has wandered in from somewhere. No one speaks to you. A few people give you a brief and curious glance, the kind you'd give a piece of furniture that's been slightly moved, before returning to their tasks. You are an anomaly, but you are not the center of attention. Their survival depends on the rhythm of the day, a rhythm that has no time for a confused stranger. You are, for now, invisible. This is the first lesson in social dynamics here. Your worth is tied to your function, and right now, you have none. You take a few tentative steps toward the center of the hall, your eyes slowly adjusting to the gloom. The longhouse is a masterpiece of engineering, designed for the harsh northern climate. The curved, ship-like walls are an intentional design choice, built to withstand the force of brutal winds. You now understand why there are no windows. Glass is an unimaginable luxury, and any opening is a point of heat loss. The only light comes from the central hearth and the two doorways at either end of the building, which are covered with heavy animal hides. It's a dim, subterranean existence, lived in perpetual twilight. As you get closer to the center, you notice the layout more clearly. The hall is divided by the long rectangular fire pit. The sleeping benches, like the one you just left, line both long walls. This is where everyone eats, sleeps, works, and socializes. Archaeologists often find remnants of daily life here, fragments of bone combs, glass beads, broken tools giving clues to the activities that took place. But they still argue over the seating arrangement. The head of the household, the chieftain or patriarch, would have undoubtedly claimed the most important seat, likely in the middle of a bench, close to the fire's warmth and light. But where did everyone else? Was it determined by age, by your importance to the family? Was the skilled blacksmith seated higher than the farmer? The placement of people in this room was a living, breathing diagram of the social order. And you, standing awkwardly in the middle, are not even on the chart. Then you hear it. A low moo. It's coming from the far end of the longhouse. You peer into the darkness on the other side of the main doorway and see them. Several cows, shifting in their stalls. In many longhouses, especially during the brutal winter months, the family's most valuable livestock lived under the same roof. A low, wattle partition might separate the human living quarters from the animal section, but the smells and sounds would have been an ever-present part of life. This was just for their protection. It was a very clever, low-tech heating solution. The body heat generated by a few large animals in an enclosed space provided a significant source of warmth, helping the entire longhouse stay just a few crucial degrees warmer. These animals were not just a source of food and milk, they were living, breathing radiators. It's a bizarrely intimate arrangement that your modern sensibilities find hard to accept. A woman walks past you, carrying a large wooden bucket filled with water. She doesn't acknowledge you, but her path forces you to step aside. You are in the way. Everything and everyone has a place and a purpose. The old man is preparing his tools. The woman is managing the fire and the morning meal. The children are contributing in their small ways. The entire longhouse operates like a single, complex organism, and you are a foreign cell. The floor might be cold and damp, and your personal space might be non-existent, but this place is alive with a powerful sense of communal purpose. And as the smell of something thick and doughed begins to rise from a large cauldron, now hanging over the fire, you feel the first pang of real hunger. Your next challenge is clear: you need to eat. The smell of cooking porridge, or whatever this thick, gray substance is, draws you closer to the central hearth. The woman who was stoking the fire is now in charge of distribution. She uses a long-handled wooden ladle to scoop the steaming mush from a large iron cauldron suspended over the flames. The pot itself is a valuable item, a symbol of household wealth. People are lining up, not in an orderly queue, but in a loose, jostling cluster around her. Each person holds out a simple wooden bowl. You have no bowl. You have nothing. You stand at the edge of the group, feeling the warmth of the fire on your face and the gnawing emptiness in your stomach. For a moment, you wonder if you'll be ignored completely. But as the crowd thins, the woman finally looks at you. Her expression isn't friendly, but it isn't hostile either. It's just practical. She gestures with her head toward a stack of wooden bowls on a nearby bench. You quickly grab one. It's heavy, carved from a single piece of wood and worn smooth with use. You can see the faint knife marks inside from countless meals scraped clean. You hold it out, and she unceremoniously slops a ladle, a few ell of the gray porridge into it. It lands with a heavy, wet plop. You retreat to the edge of the sleeping platform, finding a spot to sit where you're out of the way. You look down at your bowl. This is the fabled breakfast of a Viking. It's a thick, lumpy gruel, likely made from barley or oats, boiled in water or perhaps a thin, sour milk. You can see a few specks of what might be charred grain from the bottom of the pot. There's no sugar, no honey, no berries. The steam rising from it carries a scent that is part earthy grain, part wood smoke, and part, just a sort of bland dampness. You need a spoon. You see others using simple, carved wooden spoons. An old man near you, noticing your hesitation, grunts and nudges a spare one sitting on the bench towards you with his foot. You pick it up, grateful for the small, gruff kindness. You take your first bite. The taste is exactly what the smell promised: nothing. It's thick, slightly gritty, and lukewarm. It coats your tongue with a pasty film. There is no salt. You swallow, and it feels like a lump of wet cement going down. This isn't food for pleasure, this is fuel for labor. This is the reality that shatters the romantic image of Vikings feasting on roasted boars and overflowing tankards of mead. While feasts certainly happened on special occasions, the daily diet for the average person was relentlessly monotonous. It was porridge, coarse bread, and dairy products like skyr, a type of thick sour milk, or whey, the watery byproduct of cheese-making. Meat was a treat, reserved for celebrations or when an animal was slaughtered at the end of its useful life. You force down another spoonful, your eyes scanning the room. The chieftain, seated in his high seat, has a slightly more appealing meal. His porridge has a large, yellow dollop of something melting on top. Butter, a precious commodity, rich in calories. And some of that butter might have been a very peculiar type of preserved butter. This is a strange little secret of the era bog butter. To preserve it for long periods without salt, people would pack butter into wooden containers or wrap it in animal hides and bury it deep in a peat bog. The unique, cold, and acidic environment of the bog would pickle the butter, preventing it from spoiling for years, even centuries. Archaeologists have found caches of this bog butter, some weighing over 50 pounds. The taste was likely strong, tangy, and gamay, an acquired taste, to say the least, but an invaluable source of fat during the lean month. You washed down your mouthful of gruel with a sip from a horn cup that was passed to you. You were hoping for water, maybe ale. It's neither. It's a thin, sour, milky liquid, probably whey. It's refreshing in a slightly shocking way, but not exactly delicious. The exact recipes of these daily meals are something historians still puzzle over. They can analyze the charred residue in the bottom of a 1,000-year-old pot and tell you what grains were used, but the subtleties are lost. Did they throw in a handful of wild garlic to cut the monotony, a few for aged berries in the summer? Was there a secret ingredient that made one family's porridge slightly more edible than their neighbors, or was it universally this bland? The evidence suggests that for most people, on most days, this was it. You look back at your bowl. You have to finish it. Every calorie is precious. Wasting food is not just rude, it's an immense labor it took to produce it. The field that grew this barley had to be plowed, sown, weeded, and harvested by hand. The grain had to be threshed, winnowed, and ground, likely on a small hand-turned cornstone, a back-breaking task, usually performed by women. The water had to be hauled from a well or river. The fire had to be fed. Tasteless bowl of porridge represents the culmination of countless hours of exhausting work. With that lump of lukewarm paste settling in your stomach, you understand. This wasn't a meal. This was a contract. You've taken the fuel, now you are expected to work. As you scrape the last of the gritty porridge from your bowl, the energy in the longhouse shifts. The brief, quiet ritual of the morning meal is over. People are now moving with a more determined sense of purpose, grabbing tools and heading for the large doors at either end of the hall. The heavy hide flaps are pulled aside, and for the first time, you see the outside world. It's not a dramatic, cinematic reveal, but a slice of gray, overcast sky in the muddy ground of the farmstead. A broad, stern-faced man with a thick, reddish-brown beard approaches you. He doesn't ask your name. He just looks you up and down, his eyes assessing you not as a person, but as a collection of limbs and muscles. He seems to be the one directing the work assignments. He points a blunt finger at you, then gestures towards a group of men gathering near the door. His meaning is clear, you're with them. You quickly put your bowl and spoon back where you found them and join the group, trying to blend in. You are handed a tool. It's a long wooden shaft with a simple, heavy iron blade attached at a right angle. It's an ard, a primitive plow. It's heavy and awkward. This isn't the kind of glorious, gleaming axe you see in fantasy art. This is a tool of toil. It's iron-pitted and its wood stained dark with sweat and soil. You follow the men out of the longhouse and into the raw, damp air. The farmstead, or TUN, is a sprawling, muddy affair. The longhouse sits at the center, surrounded by a few smaller, sunken featured buildings that might be workshops or storehouses. A low stone and turf wall encloses the main area, separating the human world from the wilderness beyond. The ground is a churned-up mess of mud, animal dung, and straw. This isn't a quaint, picturesque village. It's a working farm, and it's messy. Your group heads towards a large fallow field. The soil is dark and heavy, dotted with rocks. This is the stage for your day's work. The glamour of the Viking warrior is a pervasive myth, but the truth is, the vast majority of people in the Viking Age wore armors. Raiding and trading were seasonal activities, undertaken by a relatively small portion of the population. For everyone else, life was dictated by the agricultural calendar. Survival depended not on the silver plundered from foreign monasteries, but on the grain harvested from these stubborn, rocky fields. Their entire society was built on this agrarian foundation. The wealth that funded the famous long ships and expeditions came from the surplus generated by farms like this one. The work begins. The men position the art at the edge of the field. A pair of oxen are yoked to the front. Your job, along with another man, is to guide it from behind weight to force the iron tip into the soil. It's brutal, relentless work. The art doesn't neatly turn the soil over like a modern plow. It just scratches a deep groove into the earth. You have to fight it every step of the way, wrestling with it to keep it straight, heaving it over rocks, and shoving it back down when it kicks up out of the ground. Within minutes, your back aches. Your hands, soft from a modern life, are already blistering from gripping the rough wood. The damp cold of the morning is quickly replaced by the heat of exertion. Sweat stings your eyes, mingling with the mud that gets kicked up by the oxen. The men you work with are silent, their faces set in grim concentration. They pace themselves, their movements practiced and efficient, born of a lifetime of this labor. You, in contrast, are clumsy and inefficient, wasting energy with every awkward step. They don't offer you advice, they just adjust to your incompetence, their bodies compensating for your lack of skill. You look around at the other groups in the fields. Women are bent over, breaking up the larger clods of earth with hoes or their bare hands, their backs forming a long, aching line against the horizon. Children are following behind the plow, their small hands picking stones out of the freshly turned furrow and tossing them to the edge of the field. It's a task that will never, ever end. Every year, the winter frost heaves new rocks to the surface. It is a slow, painstaking process that makes you appreciate the sheer effort required to create even a small patch of arable land in this part of the world. Historians often debate the exact division of labor, but it's clear that farming was a communal effort. While men typically handled the heavy plowing, women were responsible for a vast array of crucial tasks, from sowing seeds and weeding to milking the animals and processing the food. It was a partnership, not of equals in the modern sense, but of interdependent roles. The failure of one part of the system meant disaster for the whole. As the morning wears on, your world shrinks to the rhythmic plod of the oxen, the scraping sound of the ard, and the burning protest of your muscles. There is no glory here, no epic poetry being composed about the straightness of your furrow. There is only the mud, the sweat, and the gnawing ache in your back. This is the silent, unglamorous engine that powered the Viking Age, and as you stumble over another rock, nearly losing your grip on the plow, you realize that surviving the day isn't about fighting off a berserker. It's about surviving the work. After what feels like an eternity of wrestling with the earth, a horn blows from the direction of the longhouse. It's a long, low sound that signals the midday break. The work in the field doesn't stop abruptly, but it winds down. The oxen are unyoked and lead to a trough. You drop your share of the ard's weight with a groan, your hands screaming in protest. They're raw, reed, and a blister on your palm has already broken, leaving a tender, smarting patch, the skin. You follow the others back towards the settlement, your legs heavy with fatigue, your covered in a fine layer of mud and sweat. As you get closer, you see that not everyone went to the fields. A man sits outside one of the smaller sunken huts, hammering rhythmically on a piece of hot iron. He is a blacksmith, a vital and respected member of the community. The simple iron tip of the ard you were just using was his handiwork, a product of incredible skill. Another group is repairing a fishing net, their fingers moving with practiced speed. Every task is essential. You don't go back into the smoky darkness of the longhouse. Instead, you join the others sitting on benches or fell logs in the open air. The midday meal is brought out. It's not another serving of porridge, thankfully. The woman hands you a thick, heavy slab of dark bread. It's dense and coarse, made from barley or rye flour. It's nothing like the light, airy bread you're used to. Chewing it is a workout for your jaw. Along with it, you get a small wooden cup of ale, frothy brew you might imagine. This is small ale, a low alcohol, watery beverage that was a staple of the daily diet. It was likely safer to drink than the local water, and it provided some extra calories. It tastes slightly sour and earthy. As you sit there, gnawing on your bread, you take a moment to look at your clothes. Or rather, the clothes you were apparently given when you arrived in this time. You're wearing a simple, undyed tunic made of coarse wool. It's scratchy and irritating against your skin, especially now that you're sweaty. The cut is basic 8E shape, seamed at the sides and under the arms. It's functional but not comfortable. Underneath it, you have a linen undertunic. Linen, made from the flax plant, was softer than wool, but producing it was an incredibly labor-intensive process. Every thread of it represented hours of work. Your trousers are equally simple, made of the same rough wool, held up by a leather belt tied in a knot. On your feet are simple leather shoes, little more than a piece of hide folded around your foot and secured with a leather thong. They're soaked with mud and offer minimal support. You realize now why the Vikings in popular culture are always depicted in leather and furs. It's because wool and linen, the actual fabrics of daily life, they look itchy and drab. The colors are muted. Most people are wearing shades of brown, gray, and off-white, the natural colors of the wolf. Dyed fabrics were a sign of wealth. Bright colors like red, made from the madder root, or blue, from the woad plant, were expensive and time-consuming to produce. A vibrant blue or reed tunic would have been a status symbol, a way of broadcasting your prosperity to the world. The chieftain you recall was wearing a tunic with a thin, faded red trim, a small but significant display of his position. Archaeologists have found evidence of surprisingly sophisticated textile production. They found glass smoothing stones, which were heated and used to press wrinkles out of linen, functioning like an early iron. And the level of detail on some surviving textile fragments suggests a high degree of skill, but the fundamental materials were unforgiving. Wool, while warm even when wet, was heavy and scratchy. Linen was breathable but offered little insulation. Getting dressed in the morning wasn't about fashion, it was about choosing the right tool for the job. You wore what would best protect you from the wind, the rain, and the cold. And your current outfit is failing on several fronts. The wool is making you itch, and the dampness from the field is seeping through, chilling you to the bone despite the heat of your labor. You look at the hands of the man sitting next to you. They are calloused and scarred, the hands of someone who has worked with rough materials his whole life. He probably doesn't even notice the scratchiness of his tunic anymore. His skin is as tough as the leather of his shoes. There's a curious little detail that historians still discuss: Viking hygiene. Contrary to the brutish image, archaeological finds include tweezers, ear scoops, and intricately carved combs made of bone or antler. They seem to have taken considerable pride in their grooming, particularly their hair and beards. Perhaps keeping oneself clean and well-groomed was a small act of control, a way of maintaining a sense of order and dignity amidst the mud and the toil. It's a strange paradox of people obsessed with combing their beards while living in a smoky hall with their cows. The horn blows again, a sharp, single blast. The break is over. You push the last piece of dense bread into your mouth and wash it down with the watery ale. It's time to go back to the field, back to the yard, back to the burning ache in your muscles. And you have to do it all in these terribly impractical, incredibly itchy clothes. As you trudge back to the field, your spirits as heavy as your waterlogged shoes, you fall into step beside the old man who had nudged the spoon towards you this morning. He doesn't look at you, but he speaks, his voice a low rumble. You work like a thrall with two left hands. It's not meant to be cruel, just a statement of fact. Then he adds, but you don't run. That's something. It's the first real conversation, if you can call it that, directed at you all day. You manage a nod, too tired to form a coherent response. He seems to take this as an invitation to continue. You are not from around here. Your hands are soft. Your face has no name. No name, you ask. Your voice raspy. No family, he clarifies, spitting on the ground. Here, a man is his family. You are the son of your father, the brother of your brothers. Your name is your honor. Your family's honor is your life. He says this with a finality that leaves no room for argument. He is giving you the most important lesson you will learn here, more crucial than how to plow or how to find the latrine trench. In this world, individualism is a dangerous liability. Your identity is not your own. It is a shared commodity, held in trust by your entire kin group, your TT. Everything you do, from the quality of your work in the field to the way you carry yourself in the longhouse, reflects not just on you, but on your parents, your siblings, your cousins. An insult to you is an insult to them all. A great deed you perform brings them all honor. This intricate web of kinship is the primary social safety net and the source of all law and order. There is no police force, no central government to enforce rules. There is only the family. Later in the afternoon, during a short break to water the oxen, you see this principle in action. Two younger men who had been working in a different part of the field are suddenly shouting at each other. Their voices are sharp and angry. You can't understand all the words, but the tone is universal. One accuses the other of shirking his duties, of being lazy and weak. The accusation isn't just "you are lazy." It's phrased as, "Your father must be ashamed to have sired such a weakling." Immediately, it's not just two men arguing. The second man shows the first, his face contorted with rage. "Speak my father's name again and I'll see your teeth on the ground," he snarls. Suddenly, others are involved. The brothers and cousins of each man stop their work and begin to converge, not as neutral peacemakers, but as reinforcements. They stand behind their kinsmen, their expressions hard, their hands resting on the hilts of the long knives, or CX, that many of them carry at their belts. The situation escalates with terrifying speed. What began as a petty squabble over workload has become a matter of collective family honor. An insult cannot be left unanswered, or the entire family will be seen as weak and vulnerable to future slights. The stern-faced man with the red beard, the one who assigned you your work, strides over. He is the chieftain, or at least a man of significant authority. He doesn't shout. He speaks in a low, commanding tone, addressing the elders of the two families who have now gathered. He's not mediating in a modern sense. He is reminding them of the consequences. A fight here, in the middle of plowing season, hurts everyone. Blood spilled between kin groups creates a debt that must be paid, either in silver or in more blood. It could spiral into a full-blown blood feud, a cycle of vengeance that could last for generations and destroy both families. The concept of honor is paramount, but so is pragmatism. This is where it gets complicated, a point that legal historians still find fascinating. The resolution to these disputes often wasn't about determining who was right and who was wronged. It was about restoring balance. It was about finding a solution that allowed both families to walk away with their honor intact, even if it meant one side had to offer a public apology or pay a small compensation, perhaps a sheep or a few yards of good cloth for the insult. The two young men are still fuming, but the intervention of the elders and the chieftain cools the situation. They are pulled apart by their respective kin, muttering threats under their breath. The tension remains, a low hum beneath the surface of the day, but open violence has been averted for now. This grudge will not be forgotten. It will be stored away, remembered, and might resurface months or even years later, at a feast, after too much ale has been consumed. You watch this whole drama unfold with a sense of dread. You have no family here, no father to stand for you, no brothers to back you up. If someone insults you, there is no one to take your side. If you get into a dispute, there is no one to negotiate a settlement on your behalf. You are utterly alone. The old man's words come back to you. Your face has no name. You are a ghost in this society, a non-entity. You are a loose end, dangerously untethered. The tense afternoon bleeds into a weary evening. The horn sounds for the final time, releasing you from the tyranny of the yard. Every muscle in your body screams in a unified chorus of agony. You don't just walk back to the longhouse, you shamble. The argument from the field seems to have been put on hold, but the air is still thick with unspoken resentments. As you near the settlement, you notice a crowd gathering in a designated open area a short distance from the longhouse. It's a natural clearing, perhaps with a large stone or an old oak tree at its center. This, you realize, is the local assembly. This was the heart of the Viking legal and political world, a place where all free men of the community could convene to settle disputes, pass judgments, and make decisions for the group. It was democracy in its rawest, most chaotic form. The dispute from the field, it seems, is not going to be left to fester. It's being brought before the community. The chieftain, the same red-bearded man, stands near the center of the clearing. The two feuding families are gathered on opposite sides, their faces grim. Everyone else, farmers, blacksmiths, women, even older children, forms a wide circle around them. They are not just spectators, they are the jury. The man who made the initial accusation, the one who called the other lazy, steps forward. He speaks loudly, his voice ringing out in the still evening air. He lays out his case. He doesn't just accuse the other man of slacking, he frames it as a danger to the community. A poorly plowed field means a smaller harvest. A smaller harvest means a harder winter for everyone. HES appealing not just to honor, but to collective survival. Then the accused man steps forward. His father and two burly older brothers stand just behind him, a silent show of support. He doesn't just deny the accusation. He counters it, claiming the first man's oxen were weakened, that he was the one slowing the work. He defends his family's reputation for hard work, listing their contributions to the community. He speaks with passion his honor, and by extension his family's honor, on the line. Now, it opens up. Other men from the community step forward to speak. One man who was working nearby gives his account. He testifies that he saw the accused man taking frequent rests. Another man speaks up in defense, saying he has always known the family to be hardworking. These are the witnesses, the character references. There is no physical evidence, no surveillance footage. There is only the testimony of your neighbors. Your reputation is your only currency. This is where the concept of justice gets murky. The thing wasn't always about uncovering the objective truth. It was often a high-stakes popularity contest. A well-respected man from a powerful family could often win a case against a less popular individual, regardless of the facts. Persuasion, rhetoric, and the number of powerful relatives you had standing behind you were just as important as the truth. Historians still debate how impartial these proceedings truly were. Was it a genuine search for justice, or was it a public performance designed to reinforce the existing social hierarchy? The answer is likely somewhere in the middle. The chieftain listens patiently to all sides. He is the law speaker, a man respected for his knowledge of the ancestral laws and customs. It is his role to guide the assembly to a decision that aligns with tradition. After everyone has had their say, he steps forward and quiets the crowd. He recites the old laws concerning work duties and public insults. Then comes the verdict, but it's not a simple guilty or not guilty. He declares that the initial insult was a breach of the peace. For that, the first man must pay a fine. A small one, perhaps the equivalent of a single sheep, paid to the man he insulted. This acknowledges the damage to his honor. However, the chieftain also rules that the second man's work was indeed witnessed to be slow. His family must offer a public apology to the community and pledge an extra day's labor to the collective effort. It's a masterclass in social management. Both sides lose something, and both sides gain something. The first man's fine upholds the principle that public insults are damaging. The second man's penalty upholds the importance of communal work ethic. More importantly, both families can walk away feeling that the matter is settled. that their honor has been addressed. No blood needs to be shed. The balance is restored. The compensation, called WE or guild mangold, was the bedrock of this legal system, a complex tariff system where every crime, every body part, and every person had a price. A thumb was worth more than a pinky finger, a nobleman more than a farmer. You watch all of this with a growing sense of unease. This system works because everyone is woven into the fabric of the community. They have history, reputations, and families. You have none of these things. If you were the one accused, who would speak for you, who would pay your fine? The answer is nobody. To be without a voice at the thing is to be without rights, without protection. As the crowd disperses, the two young men shoot one final, hateful glare at each other. But the crisis has passed. For you, a new, unchilling realization has dawned in this world. Justice is not a right, it's a privilege you have not earned. As the assembly breaks up, a new energy ripples through the settlement. A boy comes running from the small makeshift dock by the nearby fjord, shouting a single word that everyone understands: ship. Immediately, the mood lifts. The lingering tension from the thing seems to evaporate, replaced by a current of excitement and curiosity. Work for the day is truly over. This is an event. You follow the flow of people moving towards the water. The fjord is a breathtaking sight, a long, deep inlet of the sea flanked by steep, rocky hills. And gliding silently across its dark, placid surface is a ship. It's not a long ship, the sleek, fearsome war machine of popular imagination. This is an air, a merchant vessel. It's shorter, wider, and deeper than a longship, with a much larger cargo capacity. It's the sturdy, reliable workhorse of the Viking sea lanes, the ancient equivalent of a cargo truck. The entire community gathers at the water's edge as the Nair expertly maneuvers towards the simple wooden jetty. The sailors on board are a motley crew. Some look like the locals, but others are different. You see a man with the dark hair and features of someone from the Celtic lands, perhaps Ireland. Another has the distinct look of a Slav from the east. The Viking trade routes were vast, stretching from North America to Constantinople and beyond, crewed by people from all over the known world. The arrival of a merchant ship is a major disruption to the monotonous rhythm of farm life. It is a connection to the wider world, a source of news, gossip, and most importantly, goods that cannot be produced here. As the crew secures the ship and lowers a gangplank, the chieftain and a few other senior members of the community go down to greet them. There's a formal exchange of words, a negotiation. The traders are offering their wares, but they will also need to be fed and housed, and their ship will need fresh water and possibly some minor repairs. Hospitality is a sacred duty, but it's also a transaction. Soon, the cargo is being brought ashore. It's a treasure trove of the exotic. You see barrels being rolled off the ship, and you catch the sharp, enticing scent of salt, a precious commodity this far inland. Salt was vital for preserving meat and fish for the winter. There are also fine, brightly dyed woolen cloths from Frisia, shimmering in the fading light. You see a man carefully carrying a crate containing delicate glassware from the Rhineland. Each fragile beaker is worth a small fortune. A trader unrolls a piece of leather on the ground and lays out his personal items for trade. There are beautiful, intricate silver brooches from Gotland, strings of amber beads from the Baltic coast, and a magnificent sword with a finely worked hilt, probably of Frankish make. But the most valuable items are the simplest. A trader holds up a whetstone, a special, fine-grained stone quarried from a specific mountain in Norway. To the farmers here, whose lives depend on sharp tools, this stone is more desirable than a piece of jewelry. Another trader has walrus ivory and furs from the far north. And, most importantly, there is silver. Not in the form of coins, which were not commonly used for daily transactions, but as hacked silver bits of chopped-up jewelry, arm rings, on ingots, valued purely by its weight. The locals bring out their own goods to barter: surplus grain, hides, wool, and perhaps some homespun cloth. You stand at the back, a silent observer. These foreign goods are a window into a world of incredible wealth and sophistication. But this ship brings more than just treasure and news. It brings dangers you cannot see. In an age with no understanding of germ theory, every foreign visitor, every piece of cargo, is a potential vector for disease. A sailor carrying a sickness his own people have developed a resistance to could introduce it into this isolated community with devastating results. A simple respiratory virus could sweep through the crowded, smoky longhouse, incapacitating the workforce at a critical time like harvest. An outbreak of dysentery from contaminated water taken on at a foreign port could be a death sentence for the very young and the old. Historians speculate that such virgin soil epidemics were a constant, invisible threat and may have been responsible for more deaths than any Viking raid. The arrival of this ship is a gamble. The potential rewards of trade are weighed against the unseen risk of plague. As the sun dips below the hills, casting long shadows across the fjord, the bartering winds down. The sailors and traders will be guests in the longhouse tonight. That means a feast. A pig has been slaughtered in their honor, and the smell of roasting meat now mingles with the scent of salt water and pine. The atmosphere is festive, a welcome break from the drudgery of work and the tension of legal disputes. But as you watch the cheerful interactions, you can't shake the feeling of unease. This connection to the outside world, this lifeline of trade and information, is also a channel for invisible dangers, a reminder that in this era, even a moment of celebration is shadowed by the constant, precarious fragility of life. The interior of the longhouse, which was dim and smoky this morning, is now transformed. The central hearth roars with a massive fire, casting a warm, dancing light that pushes back the shadows and illuminates the entire hall. The air is thick with the rich, intoxicating smell of roasting pork, a scent so powerful it almost completely masks the usual odors of smoke and humanity. Extra tallow lamps and drush lights have been lit, their flames flickering and sputtering, adding to the festive glow. The arrival of the traders has broken the monotony, and the community is celebrating. The long wooden benches are crowded with people, the locals, the visiting sailors, and the merchants. You find a space on the very end of a bench, as far from the chieftain's high seat as possible. Large joints of glistening, fat-spitting pork are being carved and passed around on wooden platters. People tear off chunks of meat with their hands or spear them with the tips of their personal knives. There are no forks. You are handed a greasy piece of pork, and you eat it with your fingers, the hot fat running down your chin. It's the most delicious thing you have ever tasted. Large drinking horns, some intricately carved and tipped with silver, are being passed from person to person. They are filled with strong, sweet-smelling mead of fermented honey wine, or a much better quality of ale than the watery stuff you had at midday. When the horn comes to you, you take a deep drink. It's potent and sweet, warming you from the inside out. The atmosphere is loud and boisterous. Men are telling stories of their voyages, their voices booming in the cavernous hall, laughter, and the occasional song, a mournful, chanted poem accompanied by the strumming of a lyre-like instrument called a tall harp. You watch the chieftain who sits at the center of it all. Before the feast began, you saw him perform a small, significant ritual. He took a piece of the roasted pork and a horn of the best meat and placed them on a small, carved wooden plate near the main support post of the longhouse. He muttered a few words, his head bowed. He was making an offering. This feast was not just for the living. It was for the unseen forces that govern their lives. This is your first real glimpse into the spiritual world of these people. Theirs was not a religion of weekly services and quiet prayer. It was a practical, transcational relationship with a host of powerful, and often fickle, supernatural beings. The gods Odin the All-Father, Thor the Thunderer, Freya the goddess of fertility were not distant, benevolent figures. They were active participants in the world, and they demanded respect and appeasement. A good harvest, a successful voyage, victory in a dispute. All of these things depended on maintaining the favor of the gods, and that favor had a price. This is why the chieftain made his offering. It was a way of thanking the gods for their bounty and ensuring their continued goodwill. This practice, known as a blot or sacrifice, was central to their belief system. On major occasions, the sacrifice might be a large animal, like a horse or an ox. The blood would be sprinkled on the participants and on the walls of the hall, and the meat would be cooked and eaten in a communal feast, sharing the meal with the gods. It was a way of binding the community together with their deities. The extent to which the average person thought about these things daily is a matter of ongoing academic debate. Was it a constant, fearful awareness, or more of a background hum of tradition? We have the grand myths, recorded centuries later by Christian scholars like Snorri Street Urlson, which tell the epic stories of the gods. But we have less information about the folk religion, the everyday beliefs and superstitions of the farmer in the field. Did he mutter a charm to Thor when a thunderstorm rolled in? Did a woman tie a specific knot in a piece of string to protect her child from sickness? These small, personal rituals are much harder for archaeology to uncover. One strange and fascinating artifact that offers a clue is the discovery of miniature hammers, representing Mjolnir, Thor's hammer. Thousands of these small amulets have been found across the Viking world. They were worn as pendants, a clear symbol of faith and a plea for the thunder god's protection. In a world full of dangers, raids, famine, disease, the unpredictable sea calling on the strongest and most straightforward of the gods for protection makes perfect sense. As the night deepens and more horns of mead are emptied, the atmosphere grows wilder. The stories get louder, the boasts more extravagant. You, sitting at the edge, feel a strange mix of inclusion and alienation. You are sharing in their food and drink, but you are not part of the spiritual contract they are renewing tonight. You haven't made an offering. You don't know the names of the local spirits or the words to the sacred chants. In this world, to be without their gods is to be as vulnerable and alone as being without kin. You are just a visitor at their table, eating their food, but not sharing in the divine protection they believe it confers. And in the firelight, the shadows in the corners of the longhouse seem to grow a little deeper. The feast continues late into the night, a rare and welcome explosion of noise and merriment. Eventually, the combination of rich food, strong mead, and sheer exhaustion from the day's labor takes its toll. The singing becomes more ragged, the stories start to slur, and one by one, people begin to find their way back to their sleeping benches. The visiting traders are given places of honor near the fire. You retreat to your own spot on the periphery, the familiar scratchy wool blanket feeling almost comforting after the long day. The roaring fire is banked, and the longhouse settles back into its familiar, smoky gloom, filled with the sound of heavy, alcohol-fueled sleep. You wake up sometime later. It's not the cold or the snoring that has disturbed you. It's a sharp, throbbing pain in your hand. In the darkness, you look down at your palm. The blister you earned from the yard, the one that broke open, is now the source of an intense rhythmic agony. It feels hot and swollen. You must have knocked it against the wooden bench in your sleep. You sit up, cradling your hand. In your own time, this would be a trivial problem. You'd get up, wash it with soap and hot water, apply some antiseptic cream from a tube, and slap a sterile bandage on it. The risk of serious infection would be minimal. Here, in this world without soap, without antiseptics, without any concept of germs, a simple cut is a potentially lethal event. You can't see the wound clearly in the dark, but you can feel it. The skin around it is tight and puffy. A terrifying thought lodges in your mind: infection. The yard was covered in dirt, soil that was enriched with animal manure. You've essentially had filth ground directly into an open wound. The stakes of this tiny injury have just been raised to a terrifying new level. There is no medicine cabinet here. There is no doctor on call. There is, however, a wise woman or a healer in the community. You saw her earlier. She's an old woman, her face a spitter bare of wrinkles, who mostly kept to herself during the feast. She is the local expert in what they call alchemy or healing. Her knowledge is a complex and to you, terrifying mixture of practical herbalism and magical superstition. If you were to go to her tomorrow, she might wash the wound, but not with soap. She'd use water, or perhaps stale ale, which had some mild antiseptic properties due to the alcohol. Then she would likely create a poultice. This is where her deep knowledge of the local environment would come in. She would know which plants had healing properties. She might use yarrow, which was known to help staunch bleeding, or the leaves of the comfrey plant. She might also use a specific type of moss, Sagana moss, which was highly absorbent and known to have antiseptic qualities. Viking Age traders even sold this moss. It was that valuable as a wound dressing. This is practical, effective folk medicine, learned through generations of trial and error. But the treatment wouldn't stop there. She would also likely perform a ritual. She might chant a series of verses over the wound, a gall drive or magical incantation to drive out the wound worm or evil spirit that they believed had caused the infection. She might carve runes, the letters of their ancient alphabet, onto a piece of wood and lay it on your hand, invoking the power of the gods to aid in the healing. To her, and to everyone else here, the physical and the magical treatment were equally important. The poultice treated the wound on your hand, but the chant treated the invisible injury to your spirit. The effectiveness of this combined approach is something medical historians and anthropologists continue to explore. Was the placebo effect of the ritual a significant factor in healing? Did the confidence it inspired in the patient actually boost their immune response? The thought of this process is both fascinating and horrifying. You lie back down, your hand throbbing in time with your own racing heartbeat. You think about the realities of injury in this age. A farmer gored by an ox, a woodcutter's axe slipping and gassing his leg, a woman getting a deep cut while gutting a fish. These weren't just painful incidents, they were life-threatening crises. Without antibiotics, an infection could quickly lead to septicemia or blood poisoning. The healers would see the telltale reed lines creeping up a limb from the site of the wound and know it was a death sentence. And what about battle wounds? The sagas are full of heroic warriors who fight on despite grievous injuries. But the reality would have been grim. A deep cut from a sword or an axe, even if it didn't kill you outright, would have a high chance of becoming infected. Archaeologists have found skeletons from the period showing evidence of heel bone fractures, some set remarkably well, indicating they had a good understanding of basic orthopedic care. But they also find skeletons with evidence of chronic, debilitating infections like osteomyelitis, a bone infection that would have caused a lifetime of agony. You press your uninjured hand against your throbbing palm, trying to apply pressure to do something, anything. The pain is a constant, insistent reminder of your own vulnerability. Your body, so accustomed to a sterile, modern world, is a fragile vessel here. You've been in this time for less than a day, and you've already sustained an injury that could, without exaggeration, kill you. The greatest threats in the Viking Age weren't always the charging berserker or the stormy sea. The most terrifying enemy was microscopic, invisible, and already inside you. And as you lie there in the dark, listening to the breathing of the sleepers around you, you feel a cold dread that has nothing to do with the temperature of the room. The next morning, your hand is worse. It's visibly swollen now, a puffy, angry red, and the throbbing has settled into a deep, persistent ache. Every movement sends a jolt of pain up your arm. You try to hide it as you force down your morning gruel, but the grim-faced chieftain, your workmaster, notices you fumbling with your spoon. He glances at your hand, his expression unreadable, and then simply points to a different group of people. Not the plowing crew, thank the gods. Your new assignment is with a group of women and older children, heading not for the fields, but for the woods that border the settlement. Your task today is foraging and gathering firewood. It's less strenuous than plowing. A small mercy, but it's no less crucial. The amount of firewood gathered before the first snows could mean the difference between relative comfort and freezing misery during the long, dark winter. As you walk towards the forest's edge, you feel a new urgency in the air, a subtle tension that wasn't there before. The days are growing shorter. The air has a new crispness to it. The frenetic energy you see all around you is a race against time. Winter in Scandinavia is not just a season, it's a siege. It's a relentless enemy that lays claim to the land for months on end, cutting off communities, burying the world in snow, and testing the limits of survival. The forest is a stark, beautiful place, a mix of pine, birch, and oak. The women you are with move through it with a quiet confidence. They are reading the landscape in a way you can't, their eyes scanning for specific plants, mushrooms, and signs of good firewood. A young girl points out a patch of late-season berries, and the children quickly set to work picking them, their small fingers stained purple. An older woman uses a small, sharp knife to dig up a specific type of root passed down through generations. She knows which mushrooms will kill you, which will feed you, and which, some historians speculate, might have been used for ritual or shamanic purposes. The famous berserker warriors who fought in a trance-like fury might have achieved their state through psychotropic mushrooms, though this is a highly contentious theory with little direct evidence. Your job is simple: gather dry, fallen branches and stack them. Your injured hand makes the work awkward and painful. You try to use it as little as possible, cradling it against your chest. Every time you accidentally knock it, you wince, the pain a sharp reminder of your precarious situation. The wood you're gathering isn't just for the main hearth in the longhouse. It's for cooking, for the blacksmith's forge, for smoking fish and meat to preserve them. The demand for fuel is insatiable. As you work, you look at the preparations being made all around the settlement. The Nair that arrived yesterday is being loaded with the goods for its return journey: wool and hides that will be traded in a southern port before the sea freezes. In the fields, the plowing continues at a frantic pace. Near the longhouse, you see men repairing the turf on the roof, adding extra layers of insulation against the coming cold. Women are hard at work at their looms inside the smaller huts, weaving woolen cloth for winter cloaks and blankets. Every single activity is now laser-focused on one goal: surviving the winter. The harvest is everything. A single failed crop, whether due to a summer drought, a wet autumn that causes the grain to rot, or an early frost, means famine. There are no global supply chains to bail you out. There are no government relief programs. If your community's harvest fails, you face a winter of starvation. The sagas are filled with grim accounts of sword winters, times so harsh that people resorted to desperate measures. The old and the sick might be put out on a hillside to die, to conserve resources for those more likely to survive. It's a brutal calculus that modern minds shrink from. But it was the reality of their world. The food you see being prepared for winter storage tells its own story. Fish are being hung on large wooden racks to dry in the wind until they are as hard as boards. Meat is being cut into strips and smoked over a low, smoldering fire. The porridge you eat every morning is made from grain that has to last until the next harvest. They are experts in preservation, using salt, smoke, air, and cold to stretch their resources. They would bury caches of food in the frozen ground, using the earth itself as a natural freezer. Every scrap of food, every calorie, is meticulously accounted for. By the end of the day, a massive pile of firewood has been stacked near the longhouse. Your contribution feels pitifully small. Your hand is a ball of fire, and you feel a feverish chill creeping into your bones, even though you've been working. The sun sets early, the sky a pale, washed-out orange. The cold that comes with the darkness feels deeper, more menacing than it did the day before. The siege is coming. The walls are being fortified, the larderettes are being filled. The entire community is a single organism, bracing for the onslaught. And as you stumble back into the longhouse, a wave of dizziness washing over you, you know that you are the weakest link in this chain. Your trivial, modern wound is turning you into a liability, just as the most dangerous time of the year is about to begin. Your fever worsens overnight. You drift in and out of a restless, sweaty sleep, your dreams filled with throbbing red hands and the biting cold of the wind. When morning comes, you can barely sit up. The old woman, the healer, is brought over to see you. She looks at your hand, which is now grotesquely swollen and streaked with reed lines creeping towards your wrist. She prods the flesh gently with a gnarled finger, her expression grim. She mutters something to the chieftain, who stands nearby. The word poison is one you understand. You expect to be left on your bench to await your fate. Instead, two men help you to your feet. You're not heading to the woods or the fields today. You're heading for the ship. The Nair is preparing to leave on the morning tide. The chieftain has decided you are to go with it. It's a brutally pragmatic decision. You are sick, a drain on resources, and potentially contagious. By sending you away, he is protecting his community. Where you are going is not his concern. It's a form of exile, but one that, paradoxically, might be your only chance of survival. The ship is heading south, to a larger trading town where there might be more skilled healers, or simply a milder climate where your body has a better chance to fight the infection, or perhaps he is simply getting rid of a problem. You'll never know. You are half carried, half dragged down to the jetty. The sailors on the Nair look at you with a mixture of pity and annoyance. A sick passenger is bad luck. They help you aboard and deposit you on a pile of furs in the stern, out of the way. The mooring ropes are cast off. With a few powerful shoves from long poles, the ship is pushed away from the dock. The large, square sail, made of heavy, oiled wool is hoisted. It catches the wind with a loud THWUMP, and the Nair begins to move, slowly at first, then picking up speed as it heads down the fjords, the open sea. You lie there, shivering with fever, watching the settlement shrink behind you. The longhouse, the smoke rising from its roof, the small figures on the shore, it all recedes into the vast, grey landscape. You are now at the mercy of the sea. The reality of sea travel in an open Viking ship is nothing like the romantic paintings. The Nair is essentially a large, sturdy open boat. There is no cabin, no shelter from the elements. You are completely exposed to the wind, the rain, and the relentless sea spray. The cold is immediate and absolute. The wind cuts through your woolen cloak, chilling you to the bone. Every wave that slaps against the hull sends a shower of icy salt water over the side, drenching you and everything around you. The sailors are indifferent to the discomfort. They are wrapped in heavy, greasy woolen cloaks and leather gear, their skin weathered and tough. They move about the deck with a sure-footedness that defies the constant rolling and pitching of the vessel. They are masters of this environment. They read the wind in the sail, the color of the water, the shape of the clouds. Their lives depend on it. Your world shrinks to this small, wet, moving space. The only sounds are the creaking of the timber, the groaning of the ropes, the constant rush of water along the hull, and the sharp cries of the gulls that follow in your wake. The Vikings called the sea the whale-road, a poetic kenning that captures its nature as a highway. But it was a treacherous highway. Storms could appear with terrifying speed, turning the sea into a chaotic nightmare of towering waves. A single rogue wave could swamp the boat, sending everyone into the lethally cold water. In these northern seas, hypothermia would kill you in minutes. You, however, are in no condition to appreciate any of this. The constant motion of the ship churns your stomach. You are seasick, feverish, and in constant pain. You lie in a miserable, shivering heap, drifting in and out of consciousness. At some point, one of the sailors, a gruff, bearded man, brings you a small cup of water. It's a small act of kindness in this brutal environment. He looks at your hand, shakes his head, and says something you don't understand before moving away. As the day wears on, the coastline disappears. You are in the open ocean now, a tiny wooden bowl tossed on an endless expanse of gray churning water. There is nothing but sea and sky. Your life is entirely in the hands of these sailors and the winds of the weather. You left the dangers of the land, the work, the disputes, the infections, only to be delivered into the jaws of a much larger, more impersonal, and far more powerful force. And as you close your eyes against the biting spray, you have no idea if you will ever see land again. You survive the journey. It's a blur of misery-fever dreams, the taste of salt water, the constant, bone-jarring motion of the ship. But after several days, you feel the ship's rhythm change. The chaotic rolling of the open sea is replaced by a smoother glide. You manage to push yourself up, your head spinning, and seal and on both sides. The Nair is navigating up a wide river estuary. The landscape here is different. It's flatter, greener, and more densely populated than the rugged fjord country you left behind. You see more farms, larger settlements, and the wooden spires of unfamiliar-looking buildings. You are arriving at a major trading hub, a place where the paths of many different peoples cross. It might be a place like Hidiba in modern-day Germany, or perhaps Birka in Sweden, one of the first true cities of the Viking world. As the ship docks at a long, bustling wharf, you are overwhelmed by the sensory overload. The noise is immense, a cacophony of languages, the hammering of shipwrights, the shouting of merchants haggling over prices. The smell is even more intense than the longhouse, a pungent mix of tar, salt fish, livestock, and the waste of 1,000 people living in close quarters. The dock is a forest of masts from ships of all shapes and sizes. You see the familiar lines of KNRs and long ships, but also broader, sturdier cogs from the south and smaller, sleeker vessels from the Slavic lands to the east. This is the engine room of the Viking Age. The people you see on the docks are a testament to its cosmopolitan nature. There are the familiar-looking Norsemen, of course, but also Frisian cloth merchants, Arab traders with silver dirhams to sell, Irish craftsmen, and Slavic slaves being laid in chains. It's a vibrant, chaotic, and dangerous melting pot. It's here in this bustling environment that the very term Viking starts to feel inadequate. The sailor who gave you water on the ship helps you to your feet. HCS, a merchant sailor, not a raider. His expedition was about moving cargo, not plundering monasteries. As you stumble onto the solid ground of the wharf, you have a profound realization. The people you left behind on the Fong, the ones who spent their days plowing, foraging, and arguing, at the thing they weren't Vikings in the way you understood the word. They were farmers, herders, and householders. The truth is, Viking was not a nationality or an ethnic identity. It was a job description. The Old Norse phrase was far-high Viking, which literally translates to go on an expedition, or more pointedly, to go raiding. It was an activity, a seasonal occupation undertaken by a specific segment of the population. A man might go a Viking for a summer to gain wealth and prestige, and then return home to his farm for the rest of the year. The man who plowed the field next to you might have been on a raid years ago, or he might never have left his home fjord. Calling everyone from this period a Viking is like calling everyone from 19th century America a cowboy. It mistakes a specific, highly visible role for the identity of the whole. You look at the town humming with activity around you. You see a craftsman carefully carving a delicate bone comb. You see a woman selling pottery. You see a merchant weighing out hack silver to pay for a barrel of wine. These people are the engine of this society, and their primary business is commerce, not conquest. The wealth that flowed through these towns was staggering. They found silks from the Byzantine Empire, spices from the Middle East, and in one famous Swedish hoard from the island of Helgo, archaeologists even unearthed a small, serene bronze statue of the Buddha, all the way from northern India. That tiny object is a testament to the sheer scale of their trade networks, a peaceful icon found amidst the supposed chaos of the north. The very origin of the word Viking is something scholars still argue about passionately. Does it come from the Old Norse word vik, meaning a bay or inlet, suggesting these raiders were people who lurked in bays, waiting to ambush ships. Or does it come from Viken, the name for the region around the Oslo fjord, implying the first Vikings came from there? Another compelling theory suggests it might be related to the Old English word wic, meaning a camp or trading settlement, like the ones the Norse established abroad. So, were they men of Viken, or campmen? The fact that we still don't know for sure shows how slippery the term has always been. Leaning against a wooden post, your fevered mind reeling with this new understanding. You see it clearly. Your struggle for survival so far has had nothing to do with the Vikings of legend. You weren't threatened by a helmeted warrior with a giant axe. You were threatened by the cold, by hunger, by grueling labor, by social isolation, and by a tiny, infected cut on your hand. You were defeated by the mundane reality of everyday life. Well-armed men disembark from a longship, their confidence and swagger marking them as warriors just returned from a successful raid. You realize they are the exception, not the rule. They are the ones who went Viking. And now, sick and alone in this bustling, indifferent city, you are about to find out what life is like at the other end of their food chain. You stumble off the gangplank onto the packed earth of the wharf, leaning against a wooden post to steady yourself. The sailor who gave you water on the ship, a man from the same fjord you just left, claps you on the shoulder, a gesture that sends a jarring shockwave of pain through your body. He presses a small, bent piece of silver into your good hand. It's hack silver, crudely snipped from a bracelet. For the ferryman, if it comes to that, he says with a grim smile, before turning and disappearing back onto his ship. He is a Norseman. But the merchant loudly arguing over the price of furs next to him is clearly Frankish, and the woman selling amber beads nearby has the high cheekbones of the Sami people from the far north. As you try to get your bearings in the noisy, bewildering chaos, a path is cleared through the crowd. A man, richly dressed in a dyed blue cloak and wearing a heavy silver arm ring, strides past. Behind him, connected by a rope tied to their iron neck collars, are four people. They are gaunt, filthy, and their eyes are hollowed out with an exhaustion that goes beyond physical fatigue. It's a spiritual emptiness. They are thralls, slaves. You stare, frozen in place. One of them, a young woman who can't be much older than 20, with tangled red hair that speaks of an Irish or Scottish origin, briefly meets your gaze. There is nothing in her eyes, no defiance, no fear, just a flat, vacant acceptance of her fate. She is property, no different from the barrels of fish or bundles of fur being unloaded around her. The procession moves on, and she is swallowed by the crowd. That single fleeting glance hits you harder than your fever. You thought you were at the bottom. You are sick, penniless but for one small scrap of silver, and utterly alone. But you are free. You are a person. These people are not. They are a commodity, the grim foundation upon which much of the Viking Age economy was built. The silver that traders used, the wealth that funded the construction of fine ships and halls, was generated in large part by the labor of, and trade in, human beings. Thralls performed the most grueling, back-breaking work. They toiled in the fields, dug peat from the bogs, served in the longhouses, and were used for any task deemed too demeaning or difficult for a free person. A wealthy farmer's status wasn't just measured by the size of his land, but by the number of thralls he owned. How did one become a thrall? The paths were really simple. The most common was capture in a raid, like the young woman you just saw. But a free person could also be enslaved for committing a crime or for failing to pay a debt. And, most damningly, it was a hereditary condition. The child of a thrall was born a thrall, their fate sealed from their first breath. They were, in a legal and social sense, dead. They had no honor, no kin to defend them, no voice at the thing. Occasionally, a thrall could be granted their freedom, a process called manumission. A master might free a loyal thrall, in his old age. Or a thrall might somehow acquire enough personal wealth to buy their own freedom, though this was incredibly rare. But even a freedman, a licentiate, was never truly equal. They would still be tied to their former master, owing him loyalty and service, their freedom a conditional and fragile thing. The daily reality for these people is a topic of intense debate among historians. The sagas sometimes tell stories of favored thralls who were treated with a degree of affection, almost as part of the family. But they also contain chillingly casual references to masters killing their thralls for minor infractions with no legal consequences. Was the kind master a rare exception to a rule of relentless, brutal exploitation, or was there a more complex, pragmatic relationship where a skilled thrall, a talented weaver, or a knowledgeable farmhand was treated with a measure of care? Much like a prized cow or a good horse, archaeological finds of iron slave collars serve as a stark reminder of the brutal reality of ownership. You look down at the piece of silver in your hand. It's warm from your skin. In this town, it might buy you a few meals, a place to sleep out of the rain. It represents a few days of survival. But to the man who owned those thralls, a human life had a price too. A healthy young thrall was worth a specific weight in silver. Your scrap of metal is a tiny fraction of that. The sight of that young woman's dead eyes has fundamentally changed your perspective. Your own struggle for survival is real and desperate. But you just witnessed a form of existence that is, in many ways, worse than death. And in this loud, vibrant, brutal city, you have never felt so alone or so lucky to be free. You spend several more days in the care of the monks. Your hand is healing, the fire of the infection slowly receding into a dull, persistent ache. The fever has broken. You are weak, but you are a survivor. The monks, with their quiet routines of prayer, work, and study, have saved your life. But their charity is not infinite. You are a pagan, a heathen in their eyes, and you cannot stay here forever. The day comes when the head monk, a stern man with kind eyes, indicates that it is time for you to leave. He gives you a small loaf of bread and a leather flask of water. And just like that, you are back on the muddy streets of the trading town. You are alive, but your situation is, if anything, more precarious. You are still weak, your right hand is heavily bandaged and largely useless, and the tiny piece of silver you had is long gone, given to the mission as a thank you offering. You are a beggar, one of many who haunt the fringes of this bustling town. You find a sheltered spot in an alleyway, huddling in the shadow of a tannery whose chemical stench makes your eyes water. For 2 days, you live on the edge, surviving on your small loaf of bread and finding water where you can. You are invisible to the merchants and craftsmen who hurry past. You are just another piece of human refuse. The nights are the worst. The autumn cold seeps into your bones, and the darkness is filled with unfamiliar sounds. This is a dangerous place for the weakened, the unprotected. On the third night, your precarious peace is shattered. It starts with a distant sound, a sound that cuts through the usual din of the town, a horn. Not the low, mellow horn from the farmstead signaling the start of the workday, but a sharp, urgent war horn. It's followed by another, then another. Then the shouting begins. Panic spreads through the streets like wildfire. People are running, doors are being barred, and the air is filled with the terrifying clang of metal on metal. From your hiding spot in the alley, you see them. They warband, pouring into the street from the direction of the river. These are not traders. These are the men of the long ships, the ones who went Viking. They are a terrifying sight. Many are huge, powerfully built men, armored in leather and chainmail, shirts that jingle with a deadly rhythm as they move. They wear conical iron helmets, some with nasal guards that give them a predatory, impersonal look. They carry round, brightly painted wooden shields and wield a terrifying arsenal of weapons, broad-bladed swords, long-handled Dane axes capable of splitting a man in two, and vicious-looking spears. This is not a battle, it's a raid. A rival clan or a band of sea rovers has descended on the town to loot its wealth. The local defenders, the chieftain's household guard, and any able-bodied men they could muster, are trying to form a shield wall in the main marketplace, but the attackers are fast and brutal. They are not interested in a pitched battle. They are a fluid, chaotic force, breaking off into smaller groups to loot, burn, and kill. The romance of Viking combat vanishes in the face of this reality. It's not a choreographed dance of heroes. It's a terrifying, confusing, and brutally swift storm of violence. An axe bites into a wooden door, splintering it open. A merchant who tries to defend his shop is cut down without a second thought. The air fills with the screams of the wounded and the terrified, the roar of the attackers, and the crackle of flames as a torch is thrown onto a thatched roof. You are not a warrior. You are a casualty waiting to happen. Your only instinct is survival. You press yourself deeper into the shadows of your alley, your heart hammering against your ribs, so hard you think it will burst. You are trapped. The main street is a whirlwind of violence, and the back of the alley is a dead end. A small group of raiders, 3 of them, breaks off and heads down your alley, looking for overlooked loot. Your blood runs cold. There is nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. One of them, a mountain of a man with a wild red beard and crazed eyes, spots you. He grins, a terrifying, predatory expression, and raises his axe. This is the end. You squeeze your eyes shut, bracing for the blow, but it doesn't come. The second raider, a younger, leaner man, puts a hand on the big man's arm. He says something, his voice sharp and commanding. He points at you, then at your bandaged hand, then at your ragged clothes. He shakes his head. The big man grunts, disappointed, but lowers his axe. They are looking for treasure, for silver, for slaves strong enough to be worth taking. You are none of those things. You are none of those things. You are not even worth the effort of killing. They shove past you, kicking over some barrels and crates, and finding nothing of value, they turn and run back to the main street to rejoin the fray. You are left trembling, leaning against the damp wall, the stench of the tannery filling your lungs. You have just survived a Viking raid, not through strength or courage, but through sheer, abject poverty and weakness. Your utter lack of value, the very thing that made you a beggar, is what just saved your life. The irony is so profound, so bitter, it almost makes you laugh. The raid rages on, but in this small, stinking corner of the town, you have been given a terrifying lesson in the brutal economics of violence. The raid burns itself out as quickly as it began. The attackers are not here to occupy the town, they are a smash and grab crew. After an hour of terror, they retreat to their ships, laden with loot and captives, and are gone, melting back into the river delta as the first light of dawn begins to touch the sky. They leave behind a scene of devastation. Smoke hangs heavy in the air, thick with the smell of burnt thatch and charred wood. The silence that descends is more unsettling than the noise of the raid, broken only by the crackling of dying fires and the soft, desperate moans of the wounded. You creep out of your alleyway as the sun rises. The street is a wreck. Debris is scattered everywhere, smashed pottery, splintered wood, abandoned goods. And there are bodies. The merchant who tried to defend his shop lies in a pool of his own blood, his wares scattered around him. A few members of the town's defense lie where they fell, their shields broken, their mail shirts rent by axe blows. The survivors begin to emerge from their hiding places, their faces pale with shock. They move like ghosts through the wreckage of their homes and businesses, but there is no time for grief. The work of healing, of rebuilding, must begin immediately. The church, having been largely spared due to the monks' neutrality and lack of obvious wealth, has become a makeshift hospital. The wounded are being brought in, and the scene inside is one of controlled chaos. The monks, aided by the town's healers including the old woman who first pointed you towards the mission, are tending to a horrific array of injuries. You watch, both horrified and fascinated. as they go to work. This is the brutal reality of pre-modern medicine in the face of traumatic injury. There is no sterile operating theater, no anesthesia beyond a horn of strong ale or a piece of leather to bite down on. A man with a deep gash in his thigh has his wound packed with a poultice of yarrow and cobwebs to staunch the bleeding. The monks then use a needle and thread likely made of animal sinew to crudely stitch the wound closed, a process that makes the man scream and thrash despite two people holding him down. Another man has an arrow shaft protruding from his shoulder. The healer doesn't pull it out, which would cause more damage due to the barbed arrowhead. Instead, she uses a small, sharp knife to cut through the flesh on the other side, pushing the arrow all the way through. It's a gruesome but effective technique. The wound is then cauterized with a red-hot piece of iron from a nearby brazier. The hiss of searing flesh and the man's strangled cry make you feel sick to your stomach. Cauterization was a brutal but common method to stop bleeding and, they believed, to cleanse a wound, though its effectiveness at preventing infection is highly debatable among historians. The most terrifying case is a man with a shattered arm, the bone clearly broken by an axe blow. The healer and the monk work together, pulling on the arm to set the bone as best they can. You can hear the sickening grate of bone on bone. They then immobilize the limb with wooden splints, padding it with moss and wrapping it tightly with strips of linen. His chances are slim. Even if the bone heals, the risk of a deep, untreatable infection in the mangled tissue is enormous. For many, a severe compound fracture was a slow, agonizing death sentence. The knowledge these healers possess is a mix of the practical and the mystical. They understand that cleaning a wound is important, even if they don't know why. They know which herbs reduce swelling and which help blood to clot. They can set bones and stitch cuts, but their toolkit is painfully limited. They have no way to fight the invisible enemy of infection. For every life they save through their grim work, another will be lost in the days to come, not to the initial injury, but to the fever and poison that follows. You see a woman weeping over her husband, who has a terrible head wound. The healer has done all she can, but the man is unconscious, his breathing shallow. The healer says a prayer to her own gods, while the woman clutches a small, newly made cross. It's a poignant image of a world in transition where old and new beliefs exist in the face of death. Some scholars believe this practical aspect of Christianity, the organized care for the sick and poor, provided by monasteries, was a powerful factor in its eventual spread through Scandinavia. In a world of such constant, brutal violence, a place that offered healing and sanctuary was a powerful advertisement for a new faith. You stand at the back, your own healed hand a stark reminder of how lucky you were. Your simple, clean-cut wound was manageable. These are the message act, contaminated wounds of battle. As you watch the healers fight their desperate, often losing battle against death, you understand that the true horror of a raid isn't just the hour of violence. It's the long, painful, uncertain days that follow, where the real struggle for survival takes place, not with an axe, but with a needle, a prayer, and a poultice. In the days following the raid, a grim new reality settles over the town. The dead are buried, the fires are put out, and the immediate work of rebuilding begins. But the violence has left a deep, unhealed wound on the community itself. The raiders were not faceless strangers from a distant land. As survivors share stories and piece together the events of that terrible night, a chilling fact emerges: they were recognized. The warband was led by a man named Björnarnorm from a clan that lived just a few days' journey up the coast. They were not just rivals, they were neighbors, people they had traded with, feasted with, and perhaps even had distant kin ties to. This wasn't an act of war against a foreign enemy. This was a violent, predatory betrayal, a breach of the unwritten rules of regional conduct. And in the Viking world, such an act could not go unanswered. The chieftain of the ravaged town, a man named Eric, who had survived the fighting with a wound to his leg, calls a thing in the now cleared marketplace. His face is a mask of cold fury. His son, a boy of no more than 16, was one of those killed in the fighting. His grief is personal, but his duty is public. He stands before the assembled survivors and formally declares a blood feud against Björnirnarm and his entire kin. This is not a decision taken lightly. A blood feud, or BLOEFND, is a sacred obligation, a duty to avenge the death of a kinsman. To fail to do so would be to accept a stain of dishonor on the entire family, marking them as weak and cowardly. But it is also a terrifying commitment, a cycle of violence that could spiral out of control and consume both families for generations. You watch from the fringes as the men of the town pledge their support to Eric. The air crackles with a thirst for vengeance. The raw grief and shock have hardened into a collective resolve. They will gather their own war band. They will strike back. They will burn Björn's hall, kill his men, and take back what was stolen from them with interest. This is the dark side of the kinship system that you first learned about on the farm. The same bonds that provide a social safety net can also become a chain, dragging everyone into a conflict started by a few. A young farmer who had no part in the raid, a cousin of Björnirnarm, is now a marked man simply because of his blood ties. Eric's kinsmen are now honor-bound to kill him if they get the chance, and his kinsmen are, in turn, honor-bound to avenge his death. Self-perpetuating engine of violence. The legal concept behind this is fascinating and brutal. It was known as an eye for an eye, but it was far more complex. The law of feuds had its own grim etiquette. A man could not just ambush his enemy. To be honorable, he was supposed to declare his intent publicly, as Eric has just done. After carrying out an act of vengeance, the killer was expected to announce it, to own the kill, so that everyone knew who was responsible and why. To kill secretly and hide the body was murder. The dishonorable act, dishonorable act. To kill openly as part of a declared feud was, in their eyes, a form of justice. In the following days, the town transforms from a place of commerce into a military camp. The blacksmith's hammer rings day and night, not forging plowshares, but sharpening swords and hammering out dents and helmets. Men practice fighting in small groups, the clash of their wooden practice shields echoing through the streets. A long ship that was being built for trade is now hastily being finished as a warship. You see the devastating social cost of this. All other work grinds to a halt. Fields are left untended, nets unamended. The town's entire energy is now focused on retribution. This is why a blood feud was so catastrophic. It didn't just cost lives, it crippled a community's ability to function, to provide for itself. Some sagas tell of feuds that lasted so long that farms fell into ruin and families starved, all in the name of an honor debt from a generation before. The exact nature and prevalence of blood feuds is still a topic of scholarly discussion. Were they a constant, daily threat, or a rarer, more extreme event that was simply more likely to be recorded in the dramatic sagas? It's hard to say. The sagas, by their nature, focus on conflict and drama, not on the peaceful resolution of disputes. But the legal codes and the archaeological evidence of mass burials and fortified settlements suggest that this level of violence was a very real and terrifying part of life. A few weeks later, the war band is ready. They gather at the wharf, a grim-faced assembly of men, their weapons gleaming in the morning light. Eric, his leg now healed enough to walk, limps aboard the long ship to lead them. They are going to sail up the coast to bring fire and death to Björnirnarm's doorstep. As you watch them depart, you realize you are witnessing the engine of the Viking Age at its most raw. This cycle of right and retribution, of honor and vengeance, is the very heart of the warrior ethos. The violence you survived was not the end of a story. It was just the beginning of another, bloodier chapter. While the men of the town are away on their vengeful expedition, a strange quiet descends. The testosterone-fueled energy of war preparation is gone, replaced by a tense, waiting atmosphere. The town is now a world of women, children, and the old. And it is in this world that you discover a different, quieter, but no less formidable kind of power. With the chieftain Eric gone, the management of the town falls to his wife, Sigrid. You had barely noticed her before. She was a quiet presence in the background, dignified and reserved. Now, she is in command. She is not a shield maiden of fantasy legend, clad in armor and wielding a sword. Her power is rooted in the domestic sphere, but it is absolute. You see her striding through the settlement, her keys jangling at her belt. This is not a quaint, janitorial detail. The keys are a powerful symbol. In the Viking Age, the mistress of a household, the Hus Raja, was the keeper of the keys. She held the keys to the food stores, to the very wealth and survival of the family. To be given the keys upon marriage was a formal transfer of authority over the entire domestic enterprise. While her husband might be the public face of the family at the thing or on a raid, she was the undisputed ruler of the farmstead. Sigrid directs the work with a calm, unwavering authority. She organizes the rationing of the remaining food supplies, ensuring they will last until the men return or, in the grim event they don't, until the community can recover. She oversees the women who are now performing tasks usually done by men mending fishing nets, patching roofs, and keeping watch on the town's perimeter. Her word is law. The respect she commands is palpable. She is not just minding the store, she is holding the entire community together through sheer force of will and competence. This reality clashes sharply with the popular image of Viking women as either passive background characters or hypersexualized, leather-clad warriors. While a few exceptional archaeological finds, like the famous Burka warrior grave, have sparked intense debate about the existence of female fighters, the evidence is still controversial. For the vast majority of women, their power was not found on the battlefield. It was found in their control over the household economy, in their legal rights, and in their role as the weavers of the social fabric. Viking women enjoyed a degree of freedom and authority that was unusual for their time. The free woman could own property, inherit land, and run a far more a business. She had the right to demand a divorce if she was mistreated. Upon divorce, she was entitled to take her dowry and any personal property with her. These were significant legal protections, far exceeding those of women in many other parts of contemporary Europe. The sagas are filled with stories of formidable matriarchs who are clever, politically astute, and often more cunning than their husbands. They are the ones who push their men to avenge insults, who broker alliances through marriage, and who manage vast estates with skill and ruthlessness. You see this practical power in action every day. Sigrid settles a dispute between two women over a borrowed loom. She makes the decision to slaughter a specific ox for food, a calculated choice based on its age in the coming winter. She organizes a foraging party to gather herbs and late-season nuts. The town doesn't just survive in the men's absence under her stewardship, it functions with a quiet efficiency. This highlights a fascinating aspect of their society that historians continue to explore: the complementary spheres of power. The man's world was largely external raiding, trading, politics at the thing. The woman's world was largely internal: the management of the household, food production, textiles. But these spheres were not unequal in importance. The success of a man's raid was meaningless if his wife had mismanaged the farm in his absence and there was no food for the winter. The two were deeply interdependent. One afternoon, you were given the task of helping an old woman at her loom in one of the small workshop huts. The work is intricate and surprisingly difficult. As you clumsily try to follow her instructions, you realize the immense skill involved in textile production. Weaving was not just a craft, it was a vital economic activity, almost exclusively the domain of women. The woolen cloth they produced was used for clothing, blankets, and the massive heavy sails that powered the long ships. A good sail was a high-tech piece of equipment, requiring immense resources and skill to produce. In a very real sense, the women at their looms were the ones who powered the Viking Age, one thread at a time. As you watch Sigrid confidently manage her community, her keys glinting in the autumn light, you understand. The strength of this society wasn't just in the sharp edges of its axes. It was in the resilience of its women, in the unyielding authority of the matriarch who guarded the keys, ensuring that there would always be a home to return to, a fire in the hearth, and a future to fight for. A few weeks after the war party's departure, a lone rider arrives. He is one of Eric's men, his horse lathered in sweat, and he brings news. The raid was a success. Bjorn Ironarm's hall has been burned to the ground, and Bjorn himself was slain in the fighting. Eric has avenged his son and restored his family's honor. But the victory came at a cost. Several of Eric's best warriors were also killed, and Derek himself, already injured, took another wound, this one to his sword arm. The war band is on its way back, but they are weakened. The news is met with a mixture of grim satisfaction and renewed anxiety. The feud is technically over. The initial debt of blood has been paid, but everyone knows it's not that simple. Bjorn's kin will now be honor-bound to seek their own revenge. The cycle of violence is not broken, merely reset. Eric's clan, now diminished in strength, is vulnerable. They need to rebuild, and they need to forge new alliances fast. A few days later, the returning warriors limp back into town. The mood is somber, not triumphant. They bring their own dead and wounded. Eric looks 10 years older, his arm in a sling, his face etched with grief and exhaustion. There is a brief, quiet feast to honor the dead and the victory, but the town's resources are low, and its spirit is battered. It is in this atmosphere of vulnerability that you witness one of the most important rituals of Viking society, a marriage negotiation. A neighboring chieftain, a man named Halfdan, who had remained neutral in the conflict, arrives with his entourage. He did not join Eric's raid, but he did not side with Bjorn either. He is a pragmatist. He is Eric's weakness and his own opportunity. He has come to propose a marriage between his own eldest son, an arrogant-looking youth named Olaf, and Eric's daughter, a quiet, serious girl of 15 named Freya. You watch the proceedings from a distance. This has nothing to do with love or romance. It is a cold, hard, strategic negotiation. It is a business deal where the currency is people, land, and power. Eric and Halfdan, along with their closest advisors, sit on opposite sides of the longhouse fire, the proposed bride and groom not even present. Halfdan makes the first offer. He speaks of the strength his warriors would bring to an alliance, how their combined power would deter any further revenge from Bjorn's surviving kin. He offers a handsome bride price, the mundar, which would be paid to Eric. This is not a purchase of the bride, as is sometimes misunderstood. It is a compensation to her family for the loss of her labor and for transferring her into another kin group. The amount of the mundar is a direct reflection of the bride's status and the groom's eagerness. Eric, despite his weakened position, is a shrewd negotiator. He counters, arguing that his daughter is of a high-status family, and the price should be higher. He also demands a generous hymen or dowry, from Halfdan's family property that will belong to his daughter personally, and which she will control. This will ensure she is not powerless in her new home. They go back and forth, haggling over the number of silver arm rings, the acres of land, the heads of cattle. It's as romantic as a fish market. The role of the bride and groom in all this is something historians still puzzle over. According to the laws, a woman could not be married against her will. She had to give her consent. But how much real choice did a young woman like Freya have when the survival and honor of her entire family depended on the alliance? Could she realistically say no? To refuse would be a massive insult to Halfdan's family and would leave her own kind dangerously exposed. She was a piece on a political chessboard, and her personal feelings were likely a secondary, if not irrelevant, consideration. Finally, after hours of tense negotiation, an agreement is reached. Hands are shaken. Horns of mead are brought out to seal the deal. The marriage will take place in a few weeks. The alliance is forged. A few days later, you see Freya by the river, skipping stones across the water. Her expression is I'm proud of the role. She is playing to save her family, we'll never know. She is about to be uprooted from her home and sent to live with a new family. A new husband she barely knows. Her life will be dedicated to bearing children, to carry on his family's line, and to managing his household. It is her duty, her fate. You attend the wedding feast. It's a much grander affair than the somber one held for the returning warriors. Both clans are present, a public display of their new unity. There are symbolic rituals, the exchange of swords between the fathers, the groom giving the bride the keys to their new home. There is feasting, drinking, and forced merriment, but underneath it all, you sense the cold reality of the transaction. This is not the union of two people in love. It is the desperate, pragmatic chaining together of two families for mutual survival. In a world this brutal, alliances are not a luxury, they are a lifeline, and this marriage is the chain. Life settles into a new, fragile rhythm. The alliance forged by the marriage has brought a tense peace to the region. The threat of immediate reprisal from Bjorn's guided, replaced by the more pressing, universal challenge of the deepening autumn. The days are shortened cold, and the work of preparing for winter continues with grim determination. It's during this lull in the long, dark evenings that you get a rare glimpse into the other side of Viking life, the moments of rest and recreation that make the hardship bearable. The warrior ethos and the toil of the farmer are dominant themes, but these people were not just one-dimensional figures of violence and labor. They also knew how to pass the time. After the evening meal of, you guessed it, porridge and perhaps some dried fish, the work of the day is done. The longhouse becomes a different kind of space. The fire is built up, casting a warm, hypnotic glow. People gather on the benches, their faces softened by the firelight, and the air fills with the low murmur of conversation. It's in these moments that the community reinforces its bonds, not through shared labor or shared danger, but through shared stories. An old man, the same one who first spoke to you on the farm, is a gifted storyteller. He is a skald, a poet and oral historian. Tonight, he tells a story from the great Icelandic sagas. As he speaks, his voice rising and falling in a rhythmic chant, the entire hall falls silent, captivated. He tells the tale of Egil Skald Agrimeses On, the famous warrior poet, a violent, ugly, and brilliant man who could compose a breathtaking poem in his head one moment and kill a man in a fit of rage the next. The story is filled with everything they admire: heroic deeds, clever wordplay, fierce loyalty to kin, and a stubborn refusal to bow to any king. You don't understand all the intricate kennings, the poetic compound metaphors like whale road for the sea or battle sweat for blood, but you are mesmerized by the performance. This is their history, their entertainment, their moral instruction, all rolled into one. These sagas, passed down orally for generations before being written down centuries later, were the cultural glue that held their world together. In another corner of the hall, you see a quieter, more intense drama unfolding. Two men are hunched over a small wooden board, intricately carved with a grid pattern. They are playing HNE or King's Table. It's a complex and strategic board game, a beloved pastime throughout the Viking world. Archaeologists have found game pieces made of bone, glass, and amber engraves from Ireland to Ukraine. HNE is not like chess. It's an asymmetrical game. One player has a king, positioned in the center of the board, protected by a small force of defenders. The other player has a larger force of attackers, positioned on the edges. The goal of the defender is to get his king to one of the corner squares. The goal of the attacker is to surround and capture the king. It's a game of siege and escape, a perfect metaphor for their world of raids and shield walls. Watching the two men play, their brows furrowed in concentration, you see the same strategic thinking that a chieftain would use in a battle or a legal dispute. There is a deep, intellectual current running through this society that is often overlooked. Not all entertainment was so serious. You hear bursts of laughter from a group of younger men who are engaged in a boasting contest, each trying to outdo the other with exaggerated tales of their own strength and prowess. They also engage in a form of ritualized, poetic insult trading called flighting, a verbal duel where the wit is as sharp as any blade. It's a way to establish dominance and social standing without resorting to actual violence, usually. And there is music. A man plays a simple, haunting melody on a bone flute. Another strums a tall harp, its mournful sound filling the hall. The music is simple, repetitive, and deeply melancholic, a soundtrack for the long, dark nights of the North. The exact nature of their musical artists still struggle to reconstruct. They have found the instruments flutes, panpipes, lyres, and even bagpipes, but the melodies themselves are lost to time. What we hear today are educated guesses, attempts to capture the spirit of a sound that has long since vanished. You sit on your bench, nursing your still sore hand, an anonymous observer to these moments of peace. You see a mother quietly singing a lullaby to her child. You see a father showing his son how to carve a small wooden horse. You see the newlyweds, Olaf and Freya, sitting together, not speaking, but sharing a horn of ale, a silent truce in their arranged union. This is the part of the Viking Age that the sagas of war and the archaeology of battle rarely capture. The quiet moments of humanity, the laughter, the games, the songs, the stories. This is what they were fighting for. This is what they were working for. It was for these brief, flickering moments of warmth and community in the heart of the smoky longhouse, a small pocket of light against the vast, encroaching darkness of the winter. One evening, a guest arrives at the longhouse. He is not a trader or a warrior. He is a Christian missionary from Francia, a traveling priest named Brother Thomas. He is a brave man, venturing alone into the heart of what his people call the pagan darkness. He is allowed entry because of the laws of hospitality, which are sacred, but he is viewed with a deep and palpable suspicion. He is the embodiment of the outside world, a representative of the powerful, encroaching forces to the south. You watch as he tries to engage the locals, speaking a halting, heavily accented Old Norse. He speaks of his one, all-powerful God of sin and salvation, of heaven and hell. To the people of the Longhouse, his words are bizarre, in some ways offensive. Eric the chieftain, his arm still healing, listens with a kind of weary amusement. He asks the priest, "You say your God is all-powerful. But does he know how to build a ship? Can he forge a sword? Can he fight the frost giants?" In winter, the priest tries to explain that these are not the concerns of his God, that the spiritual is separate from the worldly. The Norsemen around the fire find this hilarious. To them, a god who wasn't useful, who didn't have practical power in the real world, was no god at all. Thor was strong. Odin was wise in war and magic. Freya brought fertility to the fields. What did this new white Christ, as they sometimes called him, actually do? This encounter gives you a startlingly clear view of how the Vikings were perceived by the rest of Europe. To Brother Thomas and his people, these Norsemen were heathens, pagans, the scourge of God. They were the brutal, godless barbarians who descended from the north to burn churches, plunder monasteries, and murder innocent Christians. The famous prayer from the time, "If you're a Norman, normally bear a NOS. Domini, from the fury of the Northmen deliver us." O Lord, encapsulates this terror perfectly. The source of this terror was not just the violence of the raids, but their sacrilegious nature. Viking raiders specifically targeted monasteries and churches not because they were anti-Christian ideologues, but for brutally practical reasons. Monasteries were poorly defended, located in isolated areas, and most importantly, they were where the wealth was concentrated. They were the banks of the early Middle Ages, filled with gold chalices, silver relics, and other precious objects. The raiders saw a church not as a holy place, but as a treasure house. They simply could not understand the Christian concept of clerical nonviolence. To them, a community that didn't arm itself to protect its greatest treasures was either stupid or cowardly, and ripe for the picking. Brother Thomas tries to speak of the Last Judgment, of the eternal damnation that awaits those who do not accept Christ. An old warrior, his face a roadmap of scars, just laughs. Why would I want to go to your heaven? I am told it is full of poor people and beggars, kneeling and praying all day. When I die, I will go to Odin's hall, Valhalla, where I will feast and fight with all the great warriors who have gone before me until Ragnarok, when we will fight alongside the gods. Your heaven sounds very boring. This clash of worldviews is profound. The Norse conception of the afterlife was tailored to their warrior ethos. Valhalla was an exclusive club for warriors who died bravely in battle. The average farmer who died of old age in his bed did not go there. He went to the gloomy realm of hell, a neutral, shadowy place, not the fiery pit of punishment that the priest describes. The idea that a humble, peaceful life was more spiritually valuable than a glorious, violent death was completely alien to them. The historical reality of the Viking view on Christianity is, of course, more complex than this single scene suggests. The process of conversion was slow and often driven by politics as much as faith. Many Vikings were pragmatic. They saw the power and wealth of the Christian kingdoms to the advantages of adopting their religion. Some traders and mercenaries would happily accept baptism as a business transaction, a necessary step to trade or serve in Christian lands, without it having much impact on their personal beliefs. Archaeologists have found fascinating artifacts like soapstone molds that could cast both a Thor's hammer and a Christian cross simultaneously, suggesting a hedging of bets, a willingness to appeal to whichever god might be listening. The question of whether these people were truly converting or simply being pragmatic is one that historians still grapple with. As the night ends, Brother Thomas retreats to a corner to pray, a lonely figure of faith in a sea of paganism. He is treated with a grudging respect for his personal bravery, but his message has fallen on deaf ears. You realize that the image of the savage Viking is a matter of perspective. From the inside, these are just people, living by their own complex codes of honor, kinship, and faith. From the outside, from the point of view of a terrified monk watching the long ships appear on the horizon, they are the literal spawn of Satan. And as you lie on your bench, you are trapped somewhere in the middle, a stranger in a land that the rest of the world sees as the home of monsters. The feud that seemed settled by the marriage alliance and Derek's bloody vengeance is not, it turns out, over. A kinsman of the slain Bjorn Ironarm, a man named Rolf, is not satisfied. He believes the retribution was excessive, that Eric's raid destroyed too much property and killed men who were not directly responsible for the initial attack. Rather than launching another counter-raid, which would be suicidal given Eric's new alliance, Rolf chooses a different path. He takes his case to the Althing. The Althing, the Great General Assembly of Iceland, was the supreme court of the Viking world, but similar, if less formal, regional assemblies existed throughout Scandinavia. Rolf is escalating the dispute from a local matter to be settled by blood to a legal case to be settled by law and compensation. This is a significant move, a sign that even in this violent society, there were avenues to avoid endless cycles of killing. Eric is summoned to the regional thing to answer the charges. He travels there with his new ally Helfton, and their combined retinue of warriors. It's a show of force, a reminder to everyone that while he is submitting to the law, he is not doing so from a position of weakness. You are part of the baggage train, a menial helper, and so you get to witness this incredible spectacle of Viking justice firsthand. The thing is held in a large, consecrated field. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of people have gathered. It's a combination of a court, a parliament, a market, and a festival. People come to have their cases heard, but also to trade, to arrange marriages, to hear news from distant lands, and to socialize. Tents and temporary booths create a sprawling, chaotic camp around the central Lorog, where the proceedings take place. The case begins. H. Rolf stands before the assembly and lays out his grievance. He has a law speaker with him, a man renowned for his encyclopedic knowledge of the intricate legal codes. The law speaker speaks for H. Rolf, citing precedents in kinship laws with bewildering complexity. He doesn't just argue the facts, he argues the legal theory. He claims that while Eric had the right to vengeance for his son, the killing of two of Bjorn's cousins, who were not on the original raid, was an overstep. It was murder, not justice, and for that, compensation is due. Then Eric's law speaker stands to rebut the claims. He argues that the cousins were armed and fought alongside Bjorn, and thus were legitimate targets. He paints Eric not as an aggressor, but as a man defending his family's honor in the face of a brutal, unprovoked attack. The two sides go back and forth, a high-stakes debate where the lives and fortunes of two clans hang in the balance. What you are witnessing is the core of their legal system, the concept of WER guild or man price. The entire system was based on the idea that every crime, from a minor insult to a killing, could be settled by a payment of compensation. It was a way to formally end a feud, to replace the shedding of blood with the payment of silver. Every free person had a price, determined by their social rank. A powerful chieftain was worth a fortune, a simple farmer much less. There were even detailed price lists for specific injuries, so much for a lost eye, so much for a severed finger, so much for a knocked-out tooth. It was a brutally pragmatic system designed to prevent society from tearing itself apart. The final judgment is not made by a single judge. It is decided by a panel of chieftains and powerful landowners who act as a jury. Their decision is based not only on the law and the evidence, but also on the political realities. Who has more allies, who is more respected, whose case is not blind, it is a negotiation backed by the threat of force. After days of argument and backroom dealing, the verdict is delivered. The assembly finds in favor of H. Rolf, but only partially. They rule that the killing of one of the cousins was indeed excessive. Eric is ordered to pay WER guild to the man's family. The price is set at 20 marks of silver, a significant but not ruinous sum. It's a masterful compromise. H. Rolf gets a payment, which allows him to claim a victory and satisfy his family's honor without further bloodshed. Eric has to pay, but the amount is manageable, and the core of his vengeance is deemed justified. Both sides can walk away with their heads held high. The feud is officially over, settled not by the axe, but by the law. The nature of this legal system, and how often it successfully averted violence, is a major topic of historical research. The sagas are full of cases where one party refused to accept the thing's judgment, leading to more conflict. The system had no police force to enforce its rulings. Its authority rested entirely on the collective agreement of the community. If a powerful man decided to defy a verdict, there was little anyone could do, other than declare him an outlaw. Eric sullenly accepts the judgment. He has his men count out the required weight in Hack's silver and jewelry. The payment is made publicly, for all to see. The balance, as you watch the silver change hands, you see the Viking world in all its complexity. It was a society that glorified violence and had a deep-seated code of blood vengeance. But it had also developed a sophisticated and surprisingly effective legal system to control those very impulses. It was a world constantly teetering on the edge of chaos, held together by a fragile combination of honor, law, and the cold, hard calculus of silver. Eric and his retinue return home, the matter of the feud legally settled, though the sting of the silver payment remains. The alliance with Halfdan holds, and a fragile peace settles over the land as it braces for the final descent into winter. The mood in the town is tense but stable, and it's in this moment of relative calm that you learn about the ultimate punishment in the Viking world, a fate that many considered worse than a quick death by the axe. The lesson comes in the form of a man who stumbles into the settlement one afternoon. He is gaunt, his clothes are in tatters, and his eyes have a wild, hunted look. He is immediately recognized, and the reaction is instantaneous and chilling. People don't attack him. They simply shun him. Men turn their backs. Women pull their children inside. A wall of silent, absolute rejection forms around him. He tries to plead for a scrap of food, for a bit of warmth by the fire, but he is met with stony silence and cold stares. He is treated as if he is not there, a ghost that everyone has agreed to ignore. This man, you learn, is an outlaw. A Skagayar Mar, literally a forest man. He has been declared unlaw-ed by the Thing for a heinous crime, perhaps a secret murder, a betrayal of his kin, or a refusal to pay a legally ordered W-year guild. And this status is the social and legal equivalent of a death sentence, to be carried out by the entire community, or by nature itself. To be declared an outlaw meant you were stripped of everything. Your property was confiscated. Your family ties were legally severed. You were cast out of the community, outside the protection of the law. Any man could kill you on sight without any legal penalty. In fact, killing a known outlaw was often seen as a public service. You had no rights, no name, no place. You were officially no longer a person. The psychological torment of this punishment is hard to fathom. In a society built entirely on the foundations of kinship and community, to be forcibly expelled was to have your identity erased. The man you see before you is not just hungry and cold, he is a nonentity, a walking dead man. He is utterly alone in a world where being alone means death. He lingers at the edge of the settlement for a day, a desperate, pathetic figure. But no one helps him. To offer him food or shelter would be to break the law yourself, to become an accomplice to his crime and risk being cast out as well. The social pressure to conform is immense and absolute. This is a far more effective enforcement mechanism than any police's itself, through the terrifying threat of exclusion. The next morning, he is gone, having slipped back into the wilderness from whence he came. He is now really a forest man, forced to live by his wits in the unforgiving Scandinavian landscape. He must hunt, trap, and forage to survive, all while constantly looking over his shoulder, because any hunter who stumbles upon him might choose to hunt him instead. His chances of surviving the coming winter are close to zero. He will likely starve, freeze, or be killed by a wild animal or a bounty hunter. The sagas are full of the stories of famous outlaws, like Grettir the Strong or Gisli Sue are SS on. These tales romanticize the outlaw's life, portraying them as tragic, larger-than-life heroes, fighting against a cruel fate. They live in caves, perform incredible feats of strength and cunning, and survive for years against impossible odds. But this is almost certainly literary fantasy. For the average person declared an outlaw, there was no heroic saga. There was no heroic saga, and lonely death. That evening, as you sit by the fire in the longhouse, the warmth and community feel more precious than ever. You look at the faces around you, Eric, Sigrid, the old storyteller, the young newlyweds. You are still an outsider, a stranger. But you are inside. You are under the protection of a roof and a community. You are not out there, in the cold, dark forest, alone. The silence that met the outlaw was more terrifying than any wargear. It was the sound of a society revoking a man's humanity, and you understand that in this world, the clatter of a sword is fearsome, but the sound of silence can be fatal. The first snow of winter arrives. It begins not as a gentle flurry, but as a thick, heavy curtain of white, driven by a biting wind. Within a day, the entire landscape is transformed, buried under a deep blanket of snow. The world shrinks. The vibrant greens and browns of autumn are gone, replaced by a stark, monochrome palette of white and gray. The siege has officially begun. The doors of the longhouse are now kept shut, sealed with extra hides to keep out the drafts. Life moves almost entirely indoors. The air inside, already thick with wood smoke, becomes even more so. The rhythms of life change completely. The frantic outdoor labor of the harvest season is replaced by the slow, repetitive tasks of winter. Men sit on the benches, mending tools, carving new handles for axes, or oiling and polishing their weapons. The rhythmic scrape of a whetstone on steel is a constant background noise. Women work at their looms, the clatter of the weights and the shuttle a steady beat in the dim light. They spin wool into yarn, turning the fleece from the summer into the currency of warmth. Every scrap of material is precious. Old clothes are unraveled and dray woven into new cloth. Nothing is wasted. The days are short and dark. The only light comes from the central hearth and a few sputtering tallow lamps. It's a claustrophobic, twilight existence. Tempers can fray in the crowded, smoky confines. The old grudges and petty disputes you witnessed in the summer can resurface with new venom in the enforced intimacy of winter. But there is also a deep sense of shared purpose, of hunkering down together to wait out the storm. It is during this time, huddled by the fire, that the stories and news from the outside world become more important than ever. The missionary Brother Thomas, who had left before the snows, has returned, having found no safe passage south. He is tolerated, a strange fixture in their pagan household, and the news he brings is of a changing world. He speaks of powerful kings in the south and Francia, in England, who are consolidating their power. They are raising large professional armies. They are building fortified towns and stone castles. They are imposing new laws and a new religion, Christianity, on their people. The old world of feuding chieftains and independent farmsteads is being replaced by centralized, feudal kingdoms. He also brings rumors from within Scandinavia itself. He speaks of kings like Harald Bluetooth in Denmark, who boasts on his famous Jelling stone of having won all of Denmark and Norway and made the Danes Christian. He talks of Olaf Tryggvason in Norway, a former Viking raider who has returned, converted to Christianity, and is now ruthlessly imposing the new faith on his countrymen, often with fire and sword. The men in the longhouse listen to these stories with a mixture of scorn and unease. The idea of submitting to a single king, of paying taxes to a distant court, of abandoning their gods and their traditions, is deeply offensive to their sense of freedom. Eric the chieftain scoffs, "No king tells me what to do on my own land, but the seeds of change are there. You can see it in the small things. The cross that the grieving mother clutched after the raid, the monks who healed your hand and tended the wounded. The fact that Eric himself, for all his pride, submitted to the judgment of the regional thing rather than continuing a bloody feud. The old ways are being challenged, not just by foreign armies, but by new ideas. The very success of the Viking Age is, paradoxically, what is leading to its end. The wealth they plundered untraded brought them into closer contact with the more organized and sophisticated cultures of Europe. They saw the power of kings, the efficiency of organized states, the unifying force of a single religion. Some Viking leaders, tired of the endless, destructive feuding, began to see the advantages of that model. Why be a small chieftain, constantly fighting your neighbors, when you could be a king, ruling over a united realm? Historians still debate the precise timeline and causes of the end of the Viking Age, which is generally considered to be around the middle 11th century. Was it the raised kingdoms in Europe that made raiding too difficult and costly? Was it the conversion to Christianity, which slowly eroded the warrior ethos? Was it a change in climate that made their old agricultural practices less viable? The most likely answer is that it was a combination of all these factors. The world was changing, and the Vikings, for all their adaptability, were either going to have to change with it or be swept away. One evening, Brother Thomas is quietly showing a small, carved wooden cross to Freya, the young bride. Her husband, Olaf, sees this and angrily snatches it away, tossing it into the fire. But a few days later you see Freya, alone, tracing the shape of a cross in the frost on the wall. The White Christ has arrived, not with an army, but as a whisper, an idea, a promise of a different way of life. The snow continues to fall, burying the old world deeper and deeper. The longhouse feels like an ark, adrift in a sea of white, carrying the last embers of a dying age. The men still tell their stories of Thor and Odin, but they sound different now, more like tales of a glorious past than a living faith. The end is not coming in a dramatic, fiery battle like Ragnarok. It's coming quietly in the form of a southern king's decree, a merchant's coin, and a whispered prayer in the dark. The winter breaks. It happens slowly at first, then all at once. The days grow longer, the sunlight gains a little warmth, and the great melt begins. The world, which has been silent and frozen, is now filled with the sound of dripping water and rushing streams. The snow recedes, revealing the muddy, sleeping earth beneath. It's a time of rebirth and renewal. You have survived. You have survived. You have made it through an entire cycle of the seasons in this brutal, beautiful, undalian world. You look at your hand. The wound has healed into a thick, puckered scar, a permanent reminder of your journey. Your other hand is no longer soft, it is calloused and tough from a winter of hard manual tasks. You are thinner, harder, and you carry yourself with a watchfulness that wasn't there before. You are no longer the terrified, disoriented stranger who woke up in the longhouse. You are the survivor. As the land dries out, the familiar rhythms of life return. The fields must be prepared for sowing. The ships must be taken out of their winter sheds and laid hard for the coming sailing season. The energy of the community, which had been turned inward all winter, now explodes outward. But something is different. The rumors and stories of the winter have left their mark. The world feels smaller, more connected, and more dangerous. One day, a messenger arrives from the court of the regional king, the one who is slowly consolidating his power. He brings a summons. The king is calling all the local chieftains, including Eric, to his hall. He is demanding an oath of fealty and a new tax, to be paid in silver, to fund his growing army. The news is met with fury in the longhouse. Eric storms around the hall, raging against this affront to his independence. I am a king on my own land, he roars. I bend the knee to no man. The other warriors mutter in agreement, their hands on the hilts of their swords. The old pride, the fierce spirit of the free farmer, is still strong. But Sigrid, his wife, the keeper of the keys, is quiet and thoughtful. Later, you overhear her speaking with Eric in a low, urgent voice. She is the pragmatist. She speaks of their depleted numbers after the feud. She speaks of the strength of the king's new army. She points out that many other chieftains have already submitted. To fight would be suicide. It would mean the end of their family, the destruction of everything they have built. To resist is to choose an honorable death, perhaps, but a certain one. To submit is to survive. The debate rages for days. It's the central conflict of the late Viking Age, played out in miniature in this one longhouse. It is a struggle between the past and the future, between the honor of the individual and the survival of the community, between the old gods of war and the new politics of compromise. What will Eric do? The story doesn't tell us. This is where your journey ends, at this crossroads of history. You have survived a raid, a feud, a life-threatening injury, and a brutal winter. You have witnessed the intricate workings of their laws, their faith, their family structures, and their social hierarchies. You have seen the world through their eyes, a world through their eyes, a world of spirits and gods, of honor and vengeance, of communal survival and stark, lonely death. You stand at the edge of the settlement, looking out at the greening fields. A year ago, you would not have survived a single day here. Now, you know how to read the sky for weather. You know which wood burns best. You know how to stand at the thing and how to hold your tongue in the longhouse. You have learned the single most important lesson of the Viking Age: life is precarious, and survival is a daily, relentless struggle. The romantic image of the Viking hero has been stripped away, replaced by the reality of the farmer, the sailor, the woman at the loom, the chieftain struggling with an impossible choice. You have seen that their world was not just one of law and chaos. It was also one of law, of art, of complex social bonds, and of a fierce, stubborn love for the cold, hard land they called home. As the sun sets on your year here, you know that the struggle for these people is far from over, but the fight for survival, for family, for a place in a changing world, will go on just as it always has. You take one last look at the longhouse, the smoke curling from its roof into the twilight sky, a symbol of the enduring, smoky, and complicated heart of the Viking world. The fire in the longhouse has burned low now, leaving a soft bed of glowing embers. The stories have all been told, and the sleepers breathe in a slow, deep rhythm around you. The world outside is quiet, wrapped in the deep velvet of the night. The sharp edges of your day, the cold, the fear, the pain have begun to soften, blurring into the tapestry of memory. You can feel the heavy wool of your blanket, a familiar weight that no longer feels scratchy, but protective. The smoky air no longer stings your eyes, it is simply the scent of home, a scent of safety and shared warmth. You are drifting now on a calm, quiet sea, far from the Whale Road's stormy path. The rhythmic creak of the timbers has become a gentle rocking, a lullaby sung by the house itself. The faces you have come to know, Eric's stern pride, Sigurd's quiet strength, the old Skald's knowing eyes fade and merge into the soft, flowing darkness behind your eyelids. They are becoming part of your own saga, characters in a story that your dreaming mind is beginning to write. The fear and the struggle are receding, leaving behind a profound sense of peace, the deep, earned rest that comes after a long and arduous journey. You are safe now, anchored in the harbor of sleep. The long night stretches before you, a calm and silent fjord, and you let yourself drift, carried on its gentle current towards the dawn. The end of the article. Good night.